through the project as well. Are we able to go to the next slide, Morgan?
Sorry, I was just trying to get the recording going.
Oh.
Here we go, we're recording now.
Fabulous. So we are going to, so hopefully most of you guys are aware that we're using this project to describe best practice as best as we can, which means your usual care, but with the form of telehealth as your form of service delivery that you're going to be used. And we realise that it's called a case note audit, but just do be aware that even though the word audit is used, it's not to base judgment on the quality of care that the therapist is offering. We're actually looking for key components of what best practice is through your notes to be able to inform whether telehealth is or isn't currently a good service delivery option, and also how therapists and families are feeling about that. So it's intended to be a comparative case study, and we're really interested in the edge between what might work and what isn't working for telehealth. So that's why we're looking at your notes, and why, for the purpose of this pilot project, your notes might need to be slightly more in depth than your typical notes that you might write on a day-to-day basis. And we do know that, you know, it's a colleague from within your service that will be looking at your notes. No one else will actually see them, so the audit survey will be completed. But there is a reason for what you have done in a session. And again, we're not passing judgment on what you've done, what's been done in the session. We're really just looking at those notes and how that can inform us and our knowledge and our beliefs towards telehealth and how we can use that. So looking at, if we go to the next slide, you'll see there's 3 key parts to this pilot project that are slightly different from your usual care. And that's the fact that case note audits are typically not daily practice for everyone that's happening. And within your case note audits, we'll be looking for 2 formal measures, which are the GBO, which is a goal-based outcome tool, and the SRS, which is a session rating scale. And Morgan will be going through those a bit more with you later on. The key purpose for using those is that although it's a retrospective case note analysis, we still want to be seen looking at whether the fact that outcomes are being met through telehealth. So whether we are measuring a change from beginning to end, and those tools will help us look at that. At the end of the case note audit period too, there'll be a clinician interview, and there'll also be a parent interview with the whānaus that have joined in with this. And so we will send you a consent form to share with your families after you've recruited them. And again, Morgan will go through that recruitment in a bit more detail as well. So in very short, that's kind of how the pilot project will be looking. We'll go through a time frame a bit later on. Is there any major questions that's coming up there that anyone would like to answer before Morgan goes on and has a bit of a chat about what the participants are required to do during the pilot project period? Yes,
Can I just ask, so most services will have their own consent forms for commencing treatment with a family. This would be in addition to that?
Yes, it is in addition to it because of the parent interview portion. If it was just the case note audit, we wouldn't need it, but because we are needing to interview the parents around it, we have set it up as a Qualtrics survey again, so it will be a link that you can email to the families. If that doesn't work, we'll be able to look at an alternative way of doing that, but it is set up as a link, and it's basically a yes, I accept button with the consent form attached for them to read. So hopefully it's not really adding much additional work. Yes, Jo? Did you have a question, Jo?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to ask, so cases or families that you're already working remotely with, can we include those, or is it just right from the start?
No, absolutely. You could include a family if you're already offering telehealth to them. Yeah, as long as they agree to be part of it.
Yeah, that might be a really nice segue into talking about what the participating therapists are needing to do, and then we can kind of go through some more details around recruiting families, because that's actually one of our first slides up. We might jump onto that. Speaking of recruiting families, we are ideally hoping that the participating therapists would have about 4 families that they're working with. It might end up being a little bit less or a little bit more, but that's right. And we've kept the age range from 0 to 16, knowing that some services don't have children that old, or other services have children that are kind of in that older category. So 0 to 16 is the age range that we're looking for. And we've framed it as neurodisability, so that includes pretty much anything that CDS services have on their inclusion list anyway. Ideally, a family that you're already using telehealth with, so it's part of that usual care anyway. We're not wanting to set families up just for the purpose of this study, because that will kind of skew what factors help or make telehealth a good source of therapy delivery. And the next bullet point down is just saying that if we can get one of your families to be Māori in ethnicity, that is also really helpful, because we really want to make sure that we're capturing that group as well.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So 4 to 6 sessions per family.
Yeah.
Right.
So when I say
sorry.
I was just going to say our collection, we'll go through the timeline a little bit later, but where the capturing data over about 6 to 8 weeks. So that would be about fortnightly in frequency. We're also aware that for some families that will be much more than you're able to offer. And that's absolutely fine. That's all part of useful information of what we're wanting to find out is, you know, how frequently is it actually a viable option for families? And you might be doing dual service, so it might be that you're only offering telehealth as every kind of second session or something like that. So that's all part of that helpful information for us about what makes telehealth successful.
Sorry, just another question. Sorry.
Yeah.
For those of us that are part-time though, that might kind of really be pushing it to get that number of families. Are you okay with just as many as we can get?
Yeah. As I say, ideally 4, but as many as you can get. If that ends up being 2 or 3, that's okay. Yeah, we're just hoping if we can aim for 4, that's the kind of best number that we're looking for. It just means the more families that we can recruit, the more data that we can collect around what's working and what's not working for families.
And ideally there as well, Joe, because I understand that as a part-timer, you've got less of a cohort to kind of get those 4 families in from. What we are interested in...
that question was from Robin. I'm Joe. Oh. This is Robin.
Oh, sorry. I've been getting you guys muddled up. So Robin, ideally we'll be offering telehealth to, and we'll perhaps offer telehealth to some families who aren't currently doing telehealth, and the families that we're interested in are the ones that then also accept that offer. And it may be useful for you to make a note that actually I offered telehealth to 6 families, but only 2 of them accepted, because that again would be really important information for us to capture in that therapist interview portion at the end, that actually the take up from families of telehealth. And perhaps if people say, oh no, I don't want to do telehealth, and they say, you know, because of kids in the background, or you know, if they give you a reason for it, just make a note of that, and it might be really interesting to be able to reflect that back to us at the end as well.
Cool. All right, we will keep moving along. So now we'll just have a quick chat about those outcome measures. What I'm going to do is quickly change my screen share so I can show you these tools. I've just got them on a Word document, but they are set up. They will have been emailed to you as part of that email that you received today. So this is, it's kind of cut itself off on this Word document, but the one that you've got won't have it cut off. So this is our session rating scale. So at the conclusion of the session, we just want to know from our families how they're feeling in these 4 simple areas of what's been happening in the session today. Lena and I have both got a copy of these printed out, and we have trialed it once or twice with a family, and it might be helpful to try it with your colleagues as well, just so you kind of get a running script of how you might like to introduce this, because it is outside of what we would typically do for each session, just to say that it is part of the study inclusion rather than part of the usual care that you would offer. So that's our session rating scale. And we've also got our goals-based outcome tool. So this hopefully you've already set goals that you're working on with the child and family that you're working with, as we learned about in our best practice from Fee. So this will be kind of checking in at each session, have we made progress on the goal? And there's a 0 to 10 rating scale then, so just getting the family to give you a number. How have they felt the session's gone working towards this goal? Are we close to getting the goal that you are wanting to work on, or are we still kind of tracking along? I know these 2 tools are probably outside of what your current practice is looking like, so that's probably the 2 new bits to add to what you're already doing. Are there any questions or anything that pops up from seeing these tools that you're thinking about? No. Cool. All right. Well, we'll keep moving. Back to our PowerPoint. So now we've got an example of some case notes that Lena has made up very kindly for us, just to kind of show us what the key points are that we're looking for in these case audit notes. So just for reference, these notes are done in SOAP format, but if you're not the kind of therapist that uses SOAP notes or you write something differently, that's absolutely fine. Just do what you're currently doing. We're just making sure, like giving an example of how you can extract the information from these case notes. So we'll click through. So for each of the notes, they need to include all of the bullet points that are coming up on the left side of the screen. Hopefully you've got a copy of these practice notes, and if you haven't had a chance to have a look through it, they're always a good backup to go through and have a wee look. So we're just wanting to record this information that's usually in your subjective session, so figuring out where your session was, did you get consent to use telehealth, how long was your session for, who was present for both the family and where the therapist was as well, and how the technology worked, if you had any issues or if it was fine. And so the next section, we're looking at the goals that were documented and the discussion that the family had involved in it. So we're looking at, in best practice, that the families are the active members in their decision making. So we're looking through Lena's notes to say, yeah, they were looking at following instructions and transitions. So that was the discussion that they had, and some concerns that Mum brought up as well. And so we're also wanting to look at that high trusting relationship, and where we can spot that in as well. So that was, Lena's included that a little bit higher up, about, you know, some things that might not be directly relevant to what you're exactly doing in your session, but it might be other bits to show that you've built a really strong relationship with your family using telehealth as a tool. And again, this might look different to each service as well, because yeah, relationship building looks quite different to different people as well. So just making sure that you've got key bits to point out, and then we've also jumping along to our session rating scales and scores. So when we highlight this bottom section, we'll see here that actually it doesn't need to be in great depth. So you don't need to have an individual copy of the session rating scales per thing. You can just include the numbers, and that's enough. I think that is, and then the goal-based outcome is just under the bottom there as well. I think that's all for these notes. So that was just the subjective section. We've now got the objective part. So we're looking at the child's performance with the parental caregiver. And so Lena's here documented some specific things that they're working on in relation to the goal that was documented in the previous session.
Just sorry, as a note too on this part here, if we go back one slide, Morgan, with in the objective session, just being really aware that many of our services are already working in a very consultative way, and so this part of your notes where you're looking at an observation of a child's performance together with their parents or caregivers, if you are working in a more consultative way, the way that looks in someone's case notes might be more around specific comments about parents' observations of the child's performance and stuff, not necessarily your observation of the child's performance. And so therefore it might not be in the objective session. You might have recorded it in your subjective session, or particularly if you've got narrative notes, they may be somewhere else. So just your auditors will be familiar with the way that you write your notes. So again, contact us and talk to us about it, but we are very aware that services don't all sit there and observe the child. Like there is many, there's a very much a hybrid approach or only consultative approach that's happening. So that's absolutely taken into account with this as well.
Yeah, cool, alrighty. So
a question from Robin.
Yeah.
Yes, sorry, me again. Listen, I'm just going back to the last bit where you had the families are telling us the rating for the session, and I'm just wondering if there's a way that families can do it, anonymously, because I'm just thinking that might influence what they put. They might want to say to you, actually, this is not working for me.
Yeah, that is a really good point, and we have had several discussions about that particular idea, and we've kind of gone round and round in circles, and basically the best way that we can make sure that we get those numbers is by doing it then and there in the session. The return rate of giving an option to do it anonymously typically means that we don't get those numbers back. So we're better to have something that might be slightly skewed positively than to have no information at all.
It's also, we can also send you out the journal article of where this was developed. Sorry, I should have included that in the email this morning, but I might flick out another email and include it on there, because it was actually developed as a tool that was completed in discussion with a therapist. So if you're interested in that, Robin, and for the others too, I can flick out a journal article which has got the link to where the session rating scale was developed, and this is attached as an appendix at the end of it. So I'll send that out at the end of today if you like.
I guess it just does change the feeling of the session a little bit. I mean, obviously you do it at the end, but it might slightly alter the relationship that you have with the family.
The thought behind it too is that you're doing it every time, and it's got things like the end one. The two comments is that there was something missing from the session, or no, I'd like to do more of what we were doing today in the session. So ideally, what it would mean is that if you've got a high trusting relationship with your client, and they could tell you that us as therapists could then alter our practice slightly to make it suit that family a bit more next time. So it is something that's thought that we could use even outside of this sort of pilot project period, actually day to day, to inform, are we offering therapy in a way that works well for families. I've just had a message come through from Michelle as well, and she's saying that I have trialled it a couple of times with families and tried to reassure them, encourage them to provide honest feedback. So I'd be interested, Michelle, if you want to write a wee comment later to how you felt the family's feedback was that they were able to provide for you from that. But absolutely, Robin, what you're saying is something that we have discussed a lot, and ideally it's something that just gets I know, Robin, I mean before when you made a comment around it does feel funny doing it yourself rather than as an anonymous survey, but hopefully it means that you can kind of adapt your therapy a bit to suit the family better as well.
I promise once you try it a couple of times, you'll get the hang of introducing it or finding your own script that makes it feel less daunting and less formal. I'm just aware of the time, so we'll try and push through and see if we can answer some questions at the end. So we're just up to the section when we're talking about the plan. So for the purpose of family directed practice, we're wanting to make sure that the action plan is what the family have stated, or what the family are going to do following the session. So Lena's included kind of the parent section of what the parents are going to keep working on, but she's also included bits for herself as well, because that's how she likes to use her notes. So your notes may or may not include both sections, but if you have just a one-liner about what the parents are going to be working on between when they see you next, that will cover that element there. So that's wrapping up what's required of the participants really quickly. I know it's been a bit of a whirlwind, but I am conscious of the time, because we did say this was going to be a short tutorial. So we'll push on through, and there is time for questions at the end if you've got time to stick around.
So we'll go through a bit of key information for the auditors. So the first part that we need to move on to with the next slide is so when and how to complete an audit, which is very important, obviously. So as you'll know from our discussions already, the audit will be completed from someone within your same service. And the main purpose of that is that no notes need to leave the service, and it just avoids all that confidentiality breach. So at the end of the pilot project, or let's say you've discharged a client before the pilot project is finished, or finished that schedule of treatment, you can let your auditor know and just highlight to them, okay, I've had 3 sessions with this child, or 4 sessions, and then the auditor could go in and do the audits for that child. So as a participant, you'll need to let your auditor know the names of the 4 families that you've utilised telehealth with. And then the auditor will need to complete, this sounds like a lot, but ideally the survey is not going to take long. The auditor will need to complete a separate audit for every session note for that client during the period. So you may have 4 clients, and each of those clients might have had 4 sessions, which means you might, or up to 6 sessions. So you might be completing 16 to 24 audits. Does that make sense? When you're completing the audits, what you'll need is access to the case note audit survey. So hopefully you all received an email with a link to that this morning. You'll need the client file, which depending on your service may be electronic, paper-based, or both. I know for some services they are still utilising both. You could have a copy of the case note examples if you find that useful, and I'll flick you through a wee spreadsheet where you can record a specific client code, which is, let's say you're auditing for 4 clients, each of those clients will have a unique client code. One thing to be really aware of when you are doing it, please don't use Internet Explorer. You may be aware from many other programs that you already use, but it's not compatible with a lot of stuff, and some of the aspects of the survey will not work if you use Internet Explorer. So ones that I've tested on that it has worked is Microsoft Edge, Google Chrome, Safari, and Firefox. So ideally you've got one of those 4 on your device that you're able to use. The survey does also work on mobile phones. So that's an option too. It might be a nice fast way to do it. The next part that we need to go through will be marking the case note audit. So when you are marking the audit, we are using a scale of 0 to 2. So you would select a 2 if you're looking through the notes and you're saying, yep, there's evidence present of that. A 1 if you're like, oh, partial evidence, like I can see some of it, but I'm not entirely sure that I can completely see that that's there, or a 0 if there's no evidence. Some of the questions will also just have a yes, no. Hopefully that's quite self-explanatory then. When you are reading through the notes, and there's an item which you can't find in the notes, but you actually also don't feel like it's missing, so record a 2 then that it is actually adequate, because that item wasn't obviously required in that session. And if the practitioner says that the information is elsewhere, let's say you're auditing an electronic file and they say it's in the paper file and you go to the paper file and you can't find it, then record a 0 that the evidence is missing. Hopefully that won't happen. Any questions about that? You will get these slides as well. And this is all described again at the beginning of the Case Note Audit Survey tool that you've got. If you don't have any questions, we'll keep moving on. The next bit, so this is here as a unique client. Yes?
Got a question.
Yeah.
I don't think I've received is it the Case Note Audit Survey link?
Okay, I will get onto that. I'll make a note of that here. So survey link, and I'll get that through to you. I only just sent that out this morning, and it may be that I've put the incorrect, I had to type everyone's, it's a different system, so I had to manually type everyone's email addresses into it. So I may have spelt your last name slightly incorrectly.
Yeah, so I got the email with the Word document attaches.
Yeah. It was sent a couple of minutes before that, maybe 5 minutes before it. So if you don't, I don't think it came from my email address because it comes directly from the system.
So on that system, is that on that survey, does that have all the questions you were just referring to?
Yeah, we can show you that, and Morgan will do a screen share and show that to you at the end shortly, what it looks like. And so this here is a unique client code. And so what this will do is this will mean that when you complete an additional survey for the same client, it will skip a whole bunch of questions so that you only need to answer those the first time you do an audit for that client. So the first time you open an audit for a new client, let's say you're auditing a client called Flynn. I'm going to use that name because it's my son and I can remember it. So you would say, yes, this is the first time I'm completing an audit for this. And then it will prompt you to add some extra information. So it will prompt you to say what site you are from. So whether you're from Dunedin, Christchurch, just where you're from, and then it will prompt you to put a number in. And that basically means when you put that number in next time, when we are reviewing the data, we can link, right, these 4 audits belong to the same family. And it just helps us see that progress. So again, if when you're doing this, it's not working for you and you've got any questions, please contact us. Obviously, if you then go in and you're like, okay, this was session 2 and I'm auditing for Flynn again, you would select no, and you would put in the client code that you generated from the first time when you audited for Flynn. Does that make sense? Awesome. So the other information which you will only need to put in the first time you audit, if we can go to the next slide, Morgan, the other information that you'll only need to put in the first time you audit a client. So the first time you audit Flynn, at the end of the audit, it will ask you for some information around ethnicity, gender, health condition, travel time and travel distance as well, just so that we can make a bit of a judgment call in terms of time saved through telehealth in a way as well. But again, if you are generating that client code and you put it in, select no, I've already done a survey for this child, and put the client code in next time, you will not need to enter this information on additional surveys for the same client. So hopefully that's just a one-off and will help you in terms of going through paperwork. If we go to the next slide, the other thing that you will only need to enter once, hopefully, on the first time you audit a client is their goals. So the first time you're auditing the client also will ask you to state whether you can see that the goals are explicitly documented somewhere. So yes, they're explicitly documented, or actually, no, I as an outsider can't see what this therapist is working on. If you select yes, you'll come up with another prompt box, the bottom one there, where you will put in the specific goal statements. And that's just so that we can be aware of what they are. If you just click on next, Morgan, you'll see the goals might be documented very differently in lots of different services. So here I've just got an example where the COPM has been used. So if we click across again on this one, they've just used the COPM to jot down some goals. And so that there could be, yes, there's some goals explicitly documented. In your service, you might have a very clear document. Some services, it might be the IP that's got the document. So again, just using your knowledge of your own service processes there as well. The next key part we need to look at is the timeline, which you're all probably very interested in. So we have been, we have got a lot tighter with all of this just because our localities took quite a while to come in, that we're now up to the point that ideally the months of May and June would be when you are completing the pilot project period. So that's for our participating therapists. That's when you have offered telehealth to families and you are using telehealth as a form of service delivery. So ideally, if you could start thinking about your families that you'd like to offer it to, and then we can send you a link that you can forward to those families around for the consent. Get in touch with us if you need to. But it's usual care for those families, except for that you're also doing the session rating scale and the goal-based outcome measure. And you can have from the start of May to the end of June. If at any time you finish working with that family already before the end of June, let your auditor know so that they can start auditing, or your auditor might prefer to audit the sessions every time. Like, okay, you've completed a session, I'll audit it. Or they might prefer to audit all 4 sessions at the same time, just sit down and go through all 4 sessions. That's up to you. So what works, but audits can be completed all the way from when your therapist says, this is one of my families, I've had a session, right through till probably the middle of July. So ideally, it sounds like a lot, but ideally each audit will only take 5 to 10 minutes, and you can spread it out or do it as a big chunk if that works better for you. In July, we will also conduct the therapist and family interviews. So participants will need to make themselves available for that, and we'll work with you around a time. And then August, you guys are all finished again, and that's when Morgan and I will be working with Fee and the rest of her fabulous team around data analysis and report writing, and we'll hopefully be able to get something out to you guys soon. Any questions so far around all of that? I know that was a lot of information in a short amount of time.
Yeah, Lena, I've got quite a few.
Go for it, Jo. I'm up for it.
I guess the thing is, at the moment, like, we do work together with other professions. Like, I often go out with the OTs and SRTs.
Yep.
Do we need to take anything into consideration, like consent, if we're working jointly in terms of notes and sessions with another therapist?
No, I wouldn't say so. I mean, is your service as usual? Do you guys all write separate notes, or do you just do one set of notes then?
One set. If we've been on the same visit, one set. Yeah. It
may be that you need to volunteer to be the note writer during the pilot project period then. So you might just need to take that on, and obviously in that subjective bit at the beginning you would be stating that it was a joint visit with SLT and OT.
So next question. I have a physio student as well at the moment, so I've been trying to get cases for my student to see, as opposed to me doing some of those. How does that work, or have you thought about that? It's just
I have not, but does she write the notes, or are you writing the notes?
It's her first week. She's been with us for 6 weeks, so into May.
We've got our participant criteria that we need to have someone who's been practicing for more than 6 months, just because the learning curve is quite steep to learn a new service and a new service delivery method for lots of people. So she can kind of assist you, but you'd still be the main participant. Does it make sense?
Yeah, so she can't really lead any of that then, and she can't write the notes either. Okay, that's going to be a challenge for me. And my next question is, I also do a lot of wheelchair seating equipment. You talked about offering telehealth. Do we just blanket cover, I might see one client a day, because of the complexity of the kids we see. Do we just blanket offer telehealth and they can go, no, we need to see you for the wheelchair setup? Like, what in terms of that? What?
I think that's a little bit up to you. I mean, you'll know that when we completed the telehealth training, Mindy kind of shared with us that telehealth, it is a hybrid thing. So it's not a one size fits all. It's not going to be that telehealth works for everything. So it may very much be that you, I mean, for some of your wheelchair children, depending on where their review is at, you might think, actually, I'm not going to offer it because it's not appropriate. But another family, it might be, okay, are you guys interested in having telehealth for your follow-ups for this? And it might be that you can offer it. If they do accept it, it might be that you do the initial assessment, but you might have some review through telehealth. So just remembering that conversation that Mindy had with us, and what that it is a hybrid model. So just because you are using telehealth as a form of service delivery with a family, it doesn't mean every session has to be telehealth. So like Morgan said here, and in the case note audit tool, there is also an option in there of you'll be needing to state where the location of your session is. So, and that will be like, is it telehealth, or was it at their home, or was it at their centre? And then so then, or was it at your, facility? And then ideally the auditor will be able to say, if that's a family that you were offered telehealth with during the pilot project period, it might be saying something like, session today was at the Child Development Service gym, that's what we call our one, because physical measurements of the wheelchair were required. So just placing a reason as to why that was the place of the session. Does that make sense?
Because at the end of the day, you're wanting to collect the data about when, in what situations, what context telehealth works, and when it doesn't work. And sometimes it's the family's choice that they want it or don't want it. But other times you, as the clinician, will decide that I actually can't deliver a good service unless I do this particular one in person.
Yeah, thank you, Kath. That's absolutely right. And that's all really important information. So the bits where it doesn't work well is also really important, and we do want to capture that too. Anything else, Jo?
Not yet.
Does anyone else have any questions for us?
Yeah, hi, just a quick question.
Yes.
If we're sending out emails with exercise programs or questionnaires, that sort of thing, would that count as a telehealth session, or would that just be listed within the notes for the period?
Now that's really service specific. Yeah, because I think everyone's been having quite a few of those discussions lately.
Our criteria for including this as like one of those 4 to 6 audited sessions is that the duration of the session is between 40 and 60 minutes. So it might be like if you've had a phone call to set up the home program, that might be like a combination telehealth session. But the email itself, for the purpose of this study, wouldn't be included as a session itself.
Cool.
Awesome. Now, if there's no more questions, we were hoping to have time for a bit of practice. Oh, Kath?
Sorry, we seem to be talking a lot.
That's all right.
What if you have multiple locations, just recording that data? If you have multiple locations for one client, so you might see them at home, then next visit is preschool, and then next one is clinic, or
as long as you've recorded that in your session at the beginning of the session notes for that session each time, the auditor will be able to specify that in the case note audit survey tool each time.
So not a problem. Just be specific, basically.
Not a problem. Not a problem. Just be specific. And if it wasn't telehealth, but that's a family that took it up, just put your reason as to why you didn't utilize telehealth on that occasion.
Okay, and if it goes under 40 minutes, because if they are follow-up, sometimes they do go under 40 minutes.
I would say if you're counting it as a session, I know that sometimes they're not quite 40 minutes. I would still include it.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
For example, we do lots of phone follow-ups, and that is telehealth, another form of telehealth.
They might be
20 minutes.
30 minutes,
Yeah.
I think we'd just go, if we had like a number of sessions that were around that sort of time frame, we might go back and rewrite some of our protocol and and entry kind of things to match what is happening already in usual care.
Okay.
Yeah,
But
we don't limit you.
And there is the option for the auditor to select that the time frame was 0 to 30 minutes. So that is one of the options in the audit tool. So the auditor, again, will be able to reflect that in the audit tool when they look through your notes, as long as you say the session was 30 minutes long. Anything else? No, awesome. So we were going to hopefully have an online practice time now, but we don't, in the interest of time, we don't. So what I do suggest might be useful for the people, particularly who are the auditors, is whether you want to do your own notes or whether you ask one of your clinicians for a set of their notes, you can go through that audit tool and feel free to click through the whole thing, because before the pilot project goes live, I can wipe all the old practice responses. So that link that I sent you, feel free to try it out, practice auditing a couple of notes, and then if you've got any specific questions, come back to us. But absolutely, you can go through it. Participants, you're more than welcome to go through it too, just so you can see what kind of data is wanting to be collected, so that you can reflect that in your notes. And yeah, but rest assured, I can delete those historic responses before we go live with the pilot project period. So feel free to do that. And like we said, Morgan and I are available anytime. Flick us an email and we will see that we can set up a time to have a chat with you, or just email back and forth to respond to any questions that you've got. Yes, Carol.
What's the live date again?
The live date, ideally, we'll be starting at the start of May. So you've got until the end of April to keep practicing. So another 2 weeks, I think. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No,
which I think the key next step is for participants to have a look through their case notes, through their client lists, and identify a few families. Carol, I'll make sure that you get the link to the survey tool, and Alana. Oh, you've got it?
Well, yeah, Alana forwarded it to me. So
okay, just try it. It might not work because it may have generated personalised ones. So if it doesn't work, let me know. And Alana and Robin, let me know about your questions about the previous survey. If you've still got some about the DIBQ survey, and either Morgan or I can go. I am on the road for work tomorrow, but am back in the afternoon, so we can go through that with you just to make sure you can give the consent for participation.
Oh, sorry, can I just ask one more question?
Yeah.
Is there a bit of a template that we can describe this to families?
Yeah, so what I might do then is flick you guys, we do have a parent consent form, which is attached then to the consent form that they can, approve through a survey. But what I might do is just email you guys the PDF copy of that, just so that you can email it to families or give it to them to read or something. Would that be useful?
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Excellent. So, and I'll also send I'll do the parent consent form and also the journal article where the session rating scale was developed. Awesome. Excellent. Well then, thank you guys so much for your extra half an hour of time that you have offered over and above the half an hour that you offered us today. And do let us know if you've got any questions and how the practices go. I'll get those emails out hopefully this afternoon to you all with the stuff that we've talked about, and we'll be able to go from there. So thanks again for your time and for offering to be part of this project. Cheers.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks for all your hard work.